without further ado, first up we have Ross Reichart. Ross has completed a trade in scientific instrument making and worked in building control systems during his working career. He moved into IT in the late 90s and has a degree in IT, and he enjoys most technical challenges and is married with 2 grown-up sons. So Ross, over to you, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Lovely, thanks, mate. I'll try and share this screen and we'll come back to that. Can people see that? Is that sharing? Oh, no, if I click the button there you go. Hopefully you can see that slide there.
Yes, we can.
Perfect, okay, all right. I've not done one of these presentations for Freedom Solutions. It's going to take a while to get the name changed down pat, isn't it? I keep wanting to say TAD, but I haven't done one of these for a while. So Maeve asked me to do this a few weeks ago, and I thought I don't quite know what I'm going to talk about. So I'll just start back to give you a bit of background about me, basically, and then talk a little bit about my time at TAD. And if we take 15 or 20 minutes, that'll be amazing. So I'm Ross Reichart. I have spent my life in Sydney since I was about 2 years old. I think of myself as a technical guy because for as long as I can remember, I've always been involved in technical things. And I get that from my dad, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago, or only 1 year ago, actually. But Dad was an engineer and growing up used to teach me all sorts of technical things. And I've got a really early memory of him explaining the principles of electricity by using the analogy of water running through a pipe, something I actually mentioned at Dad's funeral, and because it's a long-term childhood memory, but that's who he was. And I get my enthusiasm and love of cars from Dad, and that's a passion of mine, and certainly was an interest of his. Before the age that I could drive, the technical things were bikes, billy carts, lawnmowers, and kind of anything else that you could pull apart and figure out how it worked. Probably typical young boy stuff, I guess. I can even remember having a small collection of door locks that I'd pull apart and try and understand. And to this day, I think door locks are an amazing mechanism. I've never quite mastered clocks. I think clocks would be amazing, but I've never actually pulled a clock apart. But kind of anything else. And I've always joked that I sort of missed out on the gene that makes people frightened of pulling things apart. I've never been scared of pulling things apart, although age and some bitter experience has tempered that to some degree. After the age of driving, the technical things were cars, whether it was mine or belonged to mates, and usually it was a mate's car in late high school or after the early period after high school. I couldn't afford a car, but mates had some, so I'd go down and we'd yahoo around in their cars or pull cars apart, put them together. And then I got my own car, and progressively the projects got larger and more complicated as I got more experience and more confidence. And that resulted in my first full ground-up car restoration in 1981, which was an Austin Healey Sprite. I love Sprites, always have, always will, can't get them out of my blood. I've had 4 of them so far. I've got an MG Midget, which is a Sprite by a different name, in the shed in 1,000 pieces. I have to add it was in 1 piece when I bought it, and it's now in about 10,000 of them. So the aim for that car is a restoration 2, which will be restoration number 3 for me. I can't seem to get that out of my blood either. So I guess it's not a surprise when it came time after school to choose a working life, I took a technical hands-on job and did an apprenticeship. My trade, as Maeve mentioned, is in scientific instrument making, which I can promise you it sounds a whole lot more fancy than it actually is. It's also a bit of a misnomer because we didn't make any instruments at all. The instruments we're talking about are process control instruments where we'd measure flows in a pipe, levels in a tank, temperatures, things like that, and try and control the process. And I did that down at the old CSR sugar refinery at Piermont, which is long gone. I think they pulled that down in the early 90s, and it's now full of highly priced units, apartments down there at Piermont, which is a much better use for the land because it's a beautiful site, really. But that was my trade and early work experience for 5 years down at the sugar refinery at Piermont. The trade was a good one. I enjoyed it. So the instruments, of course, were just measuring things, and I took that background then into the area of building controls, working first of all for a company called Johnson Controls, and now we're talking about high-rise commercial buildings and monitoring and controlling the air conditioning and occasionally the lifts and security systems in those buildings. My work was mainly in air conditioning. So I did that for about 16 years or something, I think 15 or 16 years with a couple of different companies. Around the end of my trade time, I did a TAFE certificate in electronics, and that was my first introduction into electronics. I started playing a little bit with electronics about then, and then moved into building controls, as I said, firstly with Johnson Controls, and then with a company called Atlas Building Services. Used the control and somewhat of the electronic experience in those jobs. And it was in those jobs, particularly with Johnson Controls, that I got introduced for the first time ever into computing. And we're talking probably about 1985, I think, something like that, 84, something like that. So yeah, about 85. So it was my introduction to personal computers, or PCs, which when I was writing this down, I realized that PCs is not a term that people use anymore. 20 years ago, people used to talk about PCs, and they were great big square boxes that sat on your desk. And it's when you write down, you think about things like that, and terms like that have come and gone in your lifetime, that you realize you've been alive for a while. So that was my introduction into personal computers, and just started to learn a bit about those from the early to mid 80s. In 1993, I finished an associate diploma of electrical engineering, mainly just out of interest. Just electronics and electrical stuff have always looked interesting, and I just did it out of interest, really. So 15 years in building control were good. Took me around the country, took me to a few places around the world. It was interesting sort of work, but over my time in that industry, I got more and more interested in IT, and the last few years of that, wrote quite a few, you'd call them assistance packages in things like Excel and Word and Microsoft Access to assist in the quoting and engineering and commissioning processes of the systems we were working with. So I guess my interest in IT took off about then, and in the last 3-4 years or so of my time in building controls, I realized that the IT side was actually more interesting to me than the building control stuff. So I did a Microsoft course and jumped ship into the IT world in the late 90s. In fact, I think it was about November 1999, so the very late 90s. Just in time for the Y2K bug, which I think we always thought was going to be a bit of a fizzer and turned out to be a fizzer. And there's another thing, Y2K bug. There's probably whole bunch of people alive now who would have to look that one up in the history books, because it's now 23 years ago. But plenty of people made good money, and I was on a few jobs myself, proving systems weren't going to collapse on Y2K. But anyway, so I probably started IT about then, got into a small IT firm who were distributing database software, and I've always enjoyed databases and web technology. So I then spent the next 22 years, basically in IT, working with the same database system, again over a couple of different companies. In 2011, again out of interest, I started doing an IT degree, just because you get the point where you think, I've learned so much along the way by reading and playing and talking to other people, but there must be stuff I don't know. So I just started to do courses remotely online through not Queensland Uni, but USQ, University of Southern Queensland, just in IT. And gradually, after about 2 or 3 years of doing that, thought, well, I've spent so much time and effort and money doing these courses ad hoc, I really should put it together and get an actual qualification out of it. So I graduated with a degree in IT in 2017, which is really, really late in my working life. In 2021, just before turning 60, I decided to stop working completely. My wife and I have 2 grown adult sons. One of them lives in Melbourne. One of them is currently living in the UK. So we don't see them, unfortunately. And we just thought that the time had come for us to try doing something different in life. It was actually, I sidelined my manager at the time when I rang him up to say, I want to stop, I want to leave the company. And I remember saying to him, I just wanted to live life differently, do some different things. And for Deb, my wife, and I, the big different thing that we share is travel. So we spent a couple of months away this year, and we'll probably go away next year as well. So we want to do a bit of that. I also want to play more with my old cars, and a big part of that was TAD, volunteering generally. So my introduction into TAD as it was then was with through a friend of ours. It was about 2020, I think. We'd organised to have a weekend away with this couple that we've known forever, all of our adult lives, really. We're away up in the Blue Mountains for a weekend, and over breakfast, I think on the Sunday morning, Jenny, our friend Jenny, said to me, started talking about TAD. Jen's an OT, and she started talking about TAD. And I said, "What's TAD?" And she explained what it was, and she said, "You'd love it." And as she explained, I thought, yeah, that does sound like me. So I actually dropped an email to Marika. I think I looked up TAD online and dropped an email to Marika, and here we are. So I joined TAD, I think it was about February, March 2021, I joined, and which was kind of peak COVID, as we'll all remember. So I started doing work at home, and the first job I did for TAD was a green safe walker. And I think I've got a picture of it here. So there's a picture of me with the 2 green safe walkers. That was the first job I did with TAD. That goes back to about, I think, March, April 2021. And then because of COVID, most of my work was done at home. I was still working for a few months while doing this, and most of it was done at home. So I'd get bikes and things delivered and picked up, and it was interesting that the couriers were my only link to TAD for quite a few months, because I didn't go to the office at all, and my only connection was emails, phone calls, to organise the jobs, and then the courier van would turn up and they'd drop jobs off or pick them up, and we had a lot of nice chats just on the driveway at the front, just talking to TAD people. But the courier drivers were the only ones I was in contact with at that stage. So that's all well and good working at home, but it can be a bit isolating. So when the worst of COVID passed, I thought I probably should get into Northmead. I could continue to get jobs dropped off, but I should get into Northmead and meet people, and that was a good thing to do. So I try and get in there a bit more these days, just to have a chat to people and spend a bit more time, so I can get to know them a bit better. And that's been fantastic, I've got to say. Great bunch of people. I really enjoyed meeting everybody, the staff and the volunteers likewise. Just really interesting, and had a few wonderful days in the bike bay there with one of the other guys who's also a car nut, and we chat cars and build bikes, and hey, what could be better than that? So as far as my work with now Freedom Solutions, I've done quite a lot of work with bikes. I think I've got another, if I can go down my next. So one of my other jobs is this bike resurrection job. It turned up, it was one of those sort of kids' bikes you see lying by the side of houses. It was rusty, the chain was off it, it was a bit of a beaten up mess. So I stripped it right down, put new wheels on it, new chain, cleaned it up. That was one of them, a bit of a bike restoration job. But I've also been involved in some special unique solutions, or adaptive solutions, really. One of them was this narrow framed walker. So we had a client here in Sydney who needed a walker to get around inside the house, but the halls and the doorways inside the house were a bit narrow. So they needed the walker narrowed down widthwise by, I think, 50 millimeters. So that was an interesting job, taking a brand new walker out of the box and cutting it in half. And you can see just across the top, I've got photos of the walker actually as it was, and then a photo of the frame as I've cut it and before it was welded. Then there's a photo of the frame as I've clamped it and aligned the tubes ready for welding. I didn't weld it, it's an aluminium frame, and it was TIG welded, and I don't TIG weld. I can weld, but not with TIG. So I got that done by a guy locally, and who did a beautiful job at a very reasonable price. And then I've actually got vinyl wrapping. I didn't repaint the bars after they've been welded. I took them to another shop and got them vinyl wrapped in a similar color, so it hid the welds a bit. And the last photo at the bottom is a photo of the frame after I'd welded it up. And weirdly, I didn't take a photo of the walker as I put it back together, but we took about 50 mils out of it. And it worked fine. I have never heard how the client went with that, but it certainly worked fine after I put it back together as far as I could see. Another job I did was I had to move a brake handle on a pram. So you can see a photo here of the a pram on the left and a close-up of the brake handle, the red handle. This client had very little use of the right side of her body, and the brake lever is on the right side of the pram handle. So we moved the brake lever to the other side. And again, I don't know why I didn't take a photo of the end result, but I didn't actually end up moving that handle because these prams are so well made, riveted and whatever, they're very hard to get apart with any confidence. You can go put them back together again. And these people had paid hundreds of dollars for the pram. In the end, I woke up in the middle of the night one night thinking, I can use a lawnmower throttle lever. That works a cable. So I charged down to my lawnmower shop the next morning, bought a throttle lever for about $15, made up a bracket to put it on the left-hand side and rerouted the cable, and it worked. So I actually wound up leaving the original red brake lever there, but decommissioned it and moved the cable to the left-hand side using a lawnmower throttle lever, and that worked. That was close to Christmas last year. I think it was about December last year, and they were, her husband was in the army and they were being restationed, so they were leaving Sydney. And they were saying, we need the walker back or the pram back. And I thought, I can't let this go. I've got to try and fix this. So it was a mad rush in the last day to get the lever and make the bracket and then drive to the other side of Sydney to drop it off to them. But I'm glad I did. It was nice to meet them and nice to get the job done. And that's actually something else I think about working with Freedom Solutions. I've played with cars, bikes, computers, but Freedom Solutions offers me access into a world that I've not had any dealings with at all, and that's the world of people with disability. And I really enjoy meeting some of the clients and seeing how we can help them. And I know Scott's talked about that, or various people have talked about that in terms of that being obviously the core mission of Freedom Solutions. But that's something as a volunteer I really enjoy. It's when I said to my boss, I want to leave work and live differently, this is exactly what I meant, doing something that I've never done before. And I really enjoy the opportunity to do that. Current and future projects. I'm currently working on a project to assist a stroke victim to play his guitar. So I'm racking my brains trying to work out how to build a device that will strum the guitar for him while he frets the chords with his left hand. After his stroke, he has virtually no use of his right hand at all. He has a beautiful guitar. I've played it. I met him. I've played his guitar. It's a beautiful guitar. He was quite a guitar player before the stroke. So if we can get something going to help him play that, that would be fantastic. And I'm actually also talking with Maeve about an internal project to build an IT system to put past information about past jobs in an archive. So we've got to have some more chats about that, but we're looking at building up something like that. I think that's about me in a nutshell. There's not a whole lot. I'm pretty simple, pretty straightforward. What you see is what you get. So that's just a short run through of where I've come from, what my enthusiasms are. Oh, cars, I should finish off with that. My love of cars really extends to British cars and particularly old British sports cars. So MG Midgets, Austin Healey Sprites, I've got a Triumph TR Roadster, and I just like those cars, but all cars in general. So if we ever meet anywhere, then just chat cars and we'll be chatting for the next hour or two. So anyway, that's me. Thanks. I don't know, Maeve, do we do questions now or do we move on?
Absolutely. Ross, thanks so much. That was a great presentation. Really enjoyed it. Does anybody have any questions for Ross after that presentation?
Awesome. a lot to relate to.
Good.
Yeah. I can easily identify with the upbringing and also the love of making stuff and putting ideas in action. It's something that appeals to me.
It's a wonderfully creative process.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. And when you get something working at the end, yeah, it's very satisfying.
Sure. Does anybody else have a question for Ross while we have him here, or feedback?
Did this pram client, did they come to you with this pram already?
They had bought the pram. Yes, it came through an OT, their OT.
Yeah.
And she, I think she had identified, well, it was pretty obvious that the client could not apply those brakes. Those brake handles are quite short. They're about probably 50 millimeters long, and it takes quite a degree of force in your hand to be able to move the brake lever. They lock into position. You can see on the photo there's a white button, and the right button is to release it. So you push the handle from vertical to horizontal, and it latches in that position to lock the brakes on, and then you release with the white button. That all takes quite a degree of strength in your hand. And she just couldn't manage it. So yeah, they'd identified they needed to move it. So they came to us with the idea of moving the handle across. Yeah, my first thought was, oh, we could probably just pull the handle of the pram off, turn it around 180 degrees and put it back into the frame, and that would put the brake handle on the left side. But it's not that simple. There's rods and mechanisms running up and down inside those handles, and the frame's all riveted together. So it's just not that simple. But yeah, they came to us with that idea.
That's all right. I was just asking because, and I don't know if Peter's on here, but I've got a project for a pram at the moment with another volunteer, but all the prams that we've been able to find have a foot brake, and we actually need a handbrake. So that's actually where they got it.
Go to your mower shop. They've got them $15.
Yeah.
I can't remember the brand of that pram. We probably could find out. They're beautiful things. That was a really nice pram.
It's a bugaboo.
Okay.
A bugaboo.
Bugaboos are expensive, but thanks.
Yes, it's a very expensive pram.
Yeah, which is why I was a bit reluctant to start pulling it to bits.
All righty. Thank you, Whitney and Marika there. Any final questions before we move on to the next presentation? Nope. Okay. Ross, thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Okay,
and Bruce, if you want to set up, then I can start introducing you and pass across to you to start your presentation. So Bruce first learned about SolveTAD when it was called TAD-VIC. Mark Doverman, the founder of TAD-VIC and a mechanical engineer, ergonomist himself, was delivering a lecture at La Trobe University for a graduate course in ergonomics that Bruce completed in 1988. Bruce thoroughly enjoyed Mark's lectures and the TAD-VIC examples he used to illustrate his topic of effective human engineering design. At the time, Bruce was too busy to volunteer, but kept in touch with the organization and became more involved after retiring at age 65. In the past 8 years, he has been involved in over 30 projects, including acting as a peer reviewer for some high-risk projects. So Bruce, thanks very much, and we will pass across to you.
Yeah, well.
There you are.
Okay, now you want to
What do I want to do?
share your screen? Screen.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah, let's
Yep. Again.
again. Hooray! Oh gosh, isn't it great to have an IT person here? If I was doing this at home, I'd be in strife. Okay, my name is Bruce, as Maeve has said, and this was a job I did. I was given in 2021 to fit a child's seat, a car seat initially, to someone's manual wheelchair, a lightweight wheelchair. I had two jobs. One of them was to build a cot that, in this case, Megan, who's the client, could wheel underneath. Megan is paraplegic, but she is a very outgoing person. She has a ski attachment that she puts underneath her. She has a special seat and 2 little outriggers, and she goes skiing at Mount Buller, even though she's paraplegic. She also goes bushwalking, and I'll show you how she does that. But in this case, I built the external frame for the cot, put a couple of sliding doors on the front so that Megan could wheel underneath it. And when the doors are closed, they're latched into place so that their baby, Sophie, can't open the doors, the gates. Anyway, making the cot was the easy part. The second part was getting a car seat that could be attached to Megan's wheelchair. And in my experience of car seats, they're very awkward, they're heavy, they're difficult to attach to a car seat belt. And getting them in and out of a car is a real hassle. So I did some research online and talked about these options with Megan. Some of them are available commercially, but in every case, Megan didn't like the extra bits and pieces. She wanted something very, very simple. And of course, there are still difficulties with these designs because they do take away a lot of the mobility and add an awful lot of extra bits and pieces. So this was one design that I found online, but I was concerned that the center of gravity in this case would alter the wheelchair considerably for going downhill. And I was a bit concerned that there'd be a stability problem. And although Dad looks very happy with his design, I could see problems with it. So the design issues that I've considered to be important, mostly important, is safety of the child. Because although we're doing this for Megan's sake, we want to make sure that Sophie, their little baby, is safe. I didn't want to have a tipping accident. We needed to prevent a fall during the transfer. The seat had to be lightweight, and any changes of gravity had to be taken into account for the stability of the wheelchair. So I selected this little bicycle seat, which is made by Thule, and it clamps onto the front stem of the handlebars of a bicycle. So you can imagine it's lightweight. It's not even 2 kilograms in weight, but it has seat belts. It comes with footrests, and it has a very simple action for fitting it to the bicycle. It will carry up to 15 kilograms, which from my human scale charts is the weight of an infant at about 3 years. So I figured it would be good for Sophie for the first 3 years of her life. That's the underside of it. And you can see on the bottom of the slide there's a clamp that fits around the support stem of the handlebars. And then the tongue at the end of that clamp fits into a corresponding slot in the child seat. There's even a padlock. You can key the thing together if you're worried about someone stealing it. I don't think Megan was worried about that. But all I had to do really was find a way of fitting the clamp at the bottom of the screen onto the wheelchair. What I hadn't realised is Megan already had this device called a freewheel. And people who are familiar with wheelchairs probably know all about this. This little attachment converts a 4-wheeled manual wheelchair into a 3-wheeler, but it gives the wheelchair much more mobility over rough surfaces. It gives you a pneumatic tyre at the front. It's about a 30 centimetre diameter. And the peculiar thing about the freewheel is the fork at the front is on an incline of about 10 degrees. And initially, when you clamp it to the foot plate of the wheelchair, the wheel is spun around 180 degrees and it's on the horizontal. When you then rotate that freewheel inwards, where it is now, it elevates the front of the wheelchair and the two little wheels come off the ground about 2 inches. So you end up with something like this. And you can see from the pictures that the little wheels are now elevated and you have 3 pumped up tyres to take you over rough terrain. So Megan had 2 of these free wheels, an old one with a flat tyre that I took home, and the one that she currently used around Mount Buller where she lives. So she lives up in the country area. I took the old one home with me and set it up in the workshop. Oh, just before I go, this just shows you another attachment to the freewheel for luggage. And that freewheel luggage carrier will take over 100 kilograms of load. So I was confident that we could use it for our client's purpose. So I took the wheel home and I made a mock-up of the wheelchair frame so that I could attach it at home and play around with it. What you see there is a load of red gum blocks to the weight of Sophie when she is 3 years old. And I've attached it temporarily with a couple of hose clips to the freewheel, and I made a little ramp and took it up to one of my visits to Megan. And I asked Megan to reverse her wheelchair on one side only up the ramp to tilt it, because I was curious to see what would happen to that load on the freewheel. And as we reversed up the ramp, the wheelchair became quite unstable, and it was clear to Megan that there are limitations to where this device can be used with her baby on it. If it tilts sideways, you reach a point where the little wheels at the front of the wheelchair come back to ground. However, there's in Megan's case, a natural inclination to avoid that because she feels uncomfortable. So it was good for us to experiment with that and just see what the limitations were. I then asked Chris, that's Sophie's dad, if he would hold Sophie in the position that Megan wanted. And I took some measurements so that we could figure out how to fit the seat. That's my very simple bracket. It's adjustable. And where you see the 2 little eyelets on the end is where the seat attaches. And those eyelets are used then to help secure the seat in place. I was concerned about preventing the seat from toppling over, so I tried 4 different methods of stabilizing the frame. I tried, first of all, cabin hooks, but my concern was, one, that Sophie could pull the cabin hook up, and that would make it useless. But secondly, that having a metal rod there for Megan against her legs could create an injury. I tried carabiners and a flexible wire, but the same problem, it could injure the wheelchair user, and Megan may not be aware that she's got a problem. I tried bungee cords, the little orange cords at the bottom, but they were useless. And so these are luggage straps that'll take a load of 68 kilos, and they have a very simple click action to hold them in place, which requires adult strength to release. So I was confident that Sophie couldn't undo them. The next thing was to try the wheelchair with the luggage straps in place, and you can see young Sophie there at the age of about 9 months. And Chris is on standby, and I'm going to show you now a little video of what happened when Megan releases the clamp. Oh, what happened? Oh, where's the video? Where's the video? Go back. That's the link. Hope this works. Oh, you want me?
No, because you're only showing the bell.
I think you have to share the other screen, Tom.
So, stop sharing. And then Zoom again.
Share again.
Yeah, just click screen. Yeah.
This one?
Yeah. Sure.
Go back to the beginning.
Yep.
If I can. Where's my volume? What's the size? What if you put your wheel in the front? Okay, can you clamp it back up there? So this has accidentally happened in the supermarket. Is that possible or not? You have to go right round. Okay. Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay. Next slide. How do we get back?
Stop sharing again.
Stop sharing.
And then share again.
Share screen again. Oh, God. Where's it gone? Yep.
Yeah.
This one.
This one I think you have to go.
Okay, so it was easier when I did this at home, obviously. So you saw there that, well, hopefully you saw it, Megan released the clamp action at the bottom and the freewheel wobbled sideways, but because the front of the clamp held in place, it was impossible for it to topple over. And the two side straps kept Sophie upright. So I want to go to the next slide here, Tom, and it's not letting me. How can I do this? Oh, this is something else. During the transfer, Megan uses this U-shaped cushion, rests her elbows on it. So when she's taking Sophie shopping down at Mansfield, she has her wheelchair in the back of the car, which she can then get out and put herself in. In the back seat of the car is this cushion, as well as the bicycle seat and the freewheel attachment. So there's a little bit of work involved in putting it together, but none of it is too hard. And Megan assures me that she's used it quite a lot. So I'm going to go to the last slide, and I'll have to ask Tom's help again, because I want to show you the video of this the first time when we put it in action in their home. Stop sharing. Go back to the beginning again. Turn the volume up. Yeah, that deserves applause. Well done. Locked in, all locked in. How about a lap around the kitchen table? Okay. Here we go, here we go, here we go. What do you reckon, Sophie? Oh, you've got to turn your wheel in. You have to bang your wheel in or something. That's it. There we go. Bye. Waving. What do you reckon? Is that good? It's all a bit new. All right. Yeah. So the last thing of the project was to outline some guidelines for the use of the seat. And if anyone's interested, there's a copy of that on the web, or at least on the records in Melbourne. But because there are safety issues, we needed to sign off on highlighting some of those issues. But the seat is designed for outdoors use. It's weatherproof. It's already approved for its safety components. So a lot of the safety issues were covered already. That's it. Any questions? No.
Bruce, thanks so much for that presentation. What a solution. Oh my gosh. How long did that take you from start to finish?
Because in this case, the client lived up in the country in Mount Buller, I had to make a few trips to do it. The actual working of it is probably only a few weeks. But going backwards and forwards and trialing things out, that took time. I think I delivered it November and probably started it in July.
Yeah, unreal. Thank you.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember, I mean, what a great project. It's well done. I remember 4 or 5 years ago, the organisation decided, or at least this is my recollection, not to do cots. And
Oh,
I'm
yes.
encouraged to see that because I was a bit uncomfortable with that
Yeah.
blanket. We weren't touching
Yeah.
it anymore.
And I'm the guilty party in that, because I was in the risk management committee at the time, and I did some research on cot safety, and there was an enormous number of injuries. I think it was over 400 injuries of kiddies falling out of cots. And so a standard was produced for cot safety that was quite strictly applied. And if you didn't have the Australian standard logo on your cot, you couldn't sell it. One of the issues was falling out, and the cot that we used to make in Melbourne had what they call barn door opening, which meant that you cut the one side in half and hinged it at the ends. But in opening up a barn door, the mother had to wheel backwards and create a gap that the child could fall through. With the sliding door project, Megan actually came to me with the concept, and she picked it up off the New South Wales website. It was on a picture in TAD New South Wales. So they clearly had made this design themselves, and by restricting the opening to no more than the width of a wheelchair, it meant there was very little chance for the child to escape. So I thought it was a great solution, but I asked one of the TAD New South Wales volunteers who'd made this design to be my peer reviewer. And he came up with some good ideas, particularly in relation to the 2 latches that held the gates in the locked position. So it was a joint effort between Victoria and New South Wales, and it worked well. So I'm pleased now we can go back to using an open door with cots, because it is very helpful.
Bruce, I've got a question about the child seat attachment. If you were doing a version 2, would there be anything that you weren't able to overcome with that design that you would be trying to resolve?
No.
Any more? That's a good answer.
Yeah, no, I was very pleased with the outcome, and what tests I undertook satisfied me that it was safe. I've called Megan just recently when I started putting these slides together to get her permission to show the family on film, and she was happy for that. She said they've used it and used it well.
Yeah, great.
Okay, wonderful. Do we have any more questions from anybody online or in the Sydney office there?
Great job, Bruce. Really, really inspiring stuff.
Good.